Hello, everybody, and welcome to Taking Control, the ADHD podcast on True Story FM. I'm Pete Wright, and I'm here with Nikki Kinzer.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Pete Wright.
Hello.
Hello.
Fine. How do you do?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing very well. It's been a good week. Catching up on some things.
Good.
It was a little bit tardy on placeholder 3, but I got it out the door. Very excited about it. We introduced Bento with a conversation with the developer, Francesco D'Alessio. And I always love catching up with Francesco. And the app is really interesting. I'm excited for you to listen to this episode because I think it will, I think it will connect for you and the people that you are working with. I think it will. I have a hunch.
I have a hunch it will too. So tell people how they can hear it.
Well, a placeholder is for our dear subscribers and supporters over on our Patreon at patreon.com/the ADHD podcast. We do all kinds of stuff over there, but this is our newest benefit to patrons is this members only placeholder podcast. You can find it over at takecontroladhd.com/placeholder. And when you get over there, you can listen to the trailer and episode 1 to get a flavor of what it is. And if you find you enjoy it, then I encourage you to jump back over to patreon.com/the ADHD podcast and check it out. It comes with all kinds of other stuff, though. We do a monthly Coffee with Pete. I do a Coffee with Pete, which is kind of a technical happy hour, and which is really fun. Bring the tech and systems things that you're thinking about, and we all gather on our Discord video in a video channel and talk about tech for an hour and a half once a month. Nikki, you've got coaching, or you're coaching with Nikki. That's the first Tuesday of every month? No, second Tuesday?
No, it's the last Tuesday of every month.
Exactly what I said. The last Tuesday of every month. Nailed it in one. Where you do live coaching for folks who want to solve their ADHD troubles.
Or at least talk about them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, at least talk about them.
Let's be honest.
And,
I don't know if we solve them exactly in that hour, but we talk about them.
We talk about them. Now, those two times with me and Nikki, those are available for our new Platinum tier, but the Placeholder podcast is available across all of our tiers, and you can get that in your Patreon podcast feed as a supporter. So lots of stuff going on. Again, patreon.com/the ADHD podcast. Go learn more, see what you think about it, and we would love it if you would jump in and support us. Do we have any news?
No, we're good. Let's go on
with
the
news.
show.
It's a news-free day. Well, then let's talk. Let's go ahead and get Rach in here. Rach Idowu was diagnosed with ADHD combined type on January 2020. And this is just before her ADHD clinic closed down due to the pandemic. Undaunted, though, she started Adulting ADHD over on Substack to document her own personal experience. Since then, she has been featured in the New York Times, Inverse, and Mashable, and has been featured as a panelist over at Facebook, at Ubisoft Comic-Con London, and other organizations to talk about ADHD awareness and ADHD in the workplace. Rach Idowu, welcome to the ADHD podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. Super excited to speak with you both today.
You have such a fun and interesting journey to become an ADHD advocate. You are fairly recently diagnosed. You're a pandemic diagnosis. Is that a fair term?
Yeah, I'm gonna claim that because it was 2 months just before the UK went into lockdown. So January 2020 was when I got diagnosed with ADHD combined type.
Wow. Okay. And so then you have a chance to get diagnosed, and then everything shuts down, and you decide, I'm so curious, your decision to start learning out loud in front of the world about your ADHD. Can you tell us about that?
The actual process of me trying to get diagnosed with ADHD started in 2018. So in the UK, we have something called the National Health Service, which is, so in the UK, healthcare is paid for by the government. Well, mostly paid for by the government. So we only pay a small amount for prescriptions. So the waiting list on the UK National Healthcare Service was about 2 years to get diagnosed with ADHD. So I went to my GP, so that's a healthcare professional, in 2018 after I had watched a documentary about ADHD and told her, look, I think I have ADHD. Before I went on Google, and people were saying, take some examples of ADHD symptoms or traits you struggle with in both childhood and adulthood, because it's very hard to get, a healthcare professional to believe you as an adult, because as some people may know, that ADHD is usually diagnosed in childhood. So my GP has said, well, I don't think you have ADHD. You graduated from university, you've got a good job. And at the time, my GP had a patient who had ADHD, and she said I wasn't like that. So we were going back and forth. I convinced her to refer me on to a psychiatrist to get an assessment. And she said, yep, she will do it. But she warned me that it will take up to 2 years. I thought she was just saying that just to get me to just not pursue the diagnosis. But she was quite right, because it took me 1 year and 6 months. So I saw 2 psychiatrists between 2018 to 2020, including my GP. And then I got my diagnosis in January 2020.
So 2 years, 1 year and 6 months to get that diagnosis. That is, I feel like there's a whole other podcast that we should be exploring why it takes that long to get a diagnosis. But that is a separate conversation. That's craziness.
It's a long waiting list in the UK. And at the time, I couldn't afford to spend money to get a private diagnosis. I was thinking, I don't want to pay this much money to just find out that I don't have ADHD, especially when I needed that money. So fast forward to 2020, when I was diagnosed with ADHD combined type, the pandemic really kicked off 2 months later in March. And so when you were diagnosed via the UK National Healthcare Service, many people are given post ADHD diagnosis catch up with a psychiatrist for about 12 months just to see how you're getting on with medication. So I had 2 sessions with the psychiatrist, and then because the pandemic kind of started in, let's say, March 2020, the UK went into a national lockdown, which meant the ADHD clinic shut down. And so they just sent me a letter in the mail saying, ADHD clinic is shut down. We will contact you when you can have your next appointment. So for about the best part of, let's say, maybe 8 months, no contact with the clinic at all. Luckily, I had just gotten my meds, but I couldn't change my dosage.
There was no accommodation in those 8 months for any sort of telehealth, any Zoom care kind of a thing?
No, and if you check my Twitter account, I was moaning about it every single month. So I started, I guess, my Twitter account maybe in May 2020, and then my Substack newsletter at the same time, because I had no one to talk to about just being recently diagnosed with ADHD. But I thought there has to be an online community. So I used the Twitter search bar and searched the term ADHD and saw many people talking about it. But at the time, I just wasn't comfortable talking about my diagnosis. I felt quite a little embarrassed and ashamed. So I made an anonymous Twitter account. So my @name was Adulting ADHD, but I used like a graphic of a woman with a brain on top of her head that I took from Canva. So I was completely anonymous and was just tweeting about my experience just being diagnosed with ADHD as an adult. And that seemed to have sparked conversations in my Twitter threads, people connected. And yeah, that's kind of how my platform started.
I love your profile image right now is I was diagnosed with ADHD as an adult, and now I can't shut up about it online.
So accurate.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, what was the documentary that you watched that triggered you into thinking that, oh, maybe this is me?
Oh, I think I'm going to get in trouble for this, but I've written about it on Substack. So it's called Take Your Pills on Netflix. Yeah. And it's a documentary that many people in the ADHD community aren't impressed with, including myself now, because of like the way they stigmatize the usage of like ADHD medication. But it is actually a part of the story and why I got diagnosed. When I saw grown men talk about, struggling with things like doing chores or concentrating, and then how ADHD medication just really changed their lives, it was like a eureka moment for me to see that, a man in his 40s is struggling with this. And it does seem basic to other people, but this is exactly what I identify with and what I'm struggling with.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what led me to do a bunch of research online and do every single free online ADHD test I could before I went to my GP.
I'm glad you mentioned it, because I've seen the documentary. Not my favorite.
Oh, we got mad.
Yeah.
Collectively.
However, I love the fact that that she could watch it and say, wait a minute, there's something in it that I'm resonating as a true ADHDer. And that to me is really positive, and is definitely a positive of it. Yeah.
You started tweeting about it. It sounds like just out of frustration at the pace and pandemic and diagnosis. At some point you decided, okay, or I guess I should say, was there ever a decision that you made in which you said, I am going to shift my identity and become someone who becomes known as doing this research out loud and learning and sharing out loud?
No, so it was completely unplanned. I mean, I work in the public sector. I did at the time and I still do now. And so it was essentially just me getting on Twitter, asking people a bunch of questions on ADHD. And I just saw how many people were responding, connecting with each other. And then my newsletter, I just saw it as almost a personal diary to document how it's been adulting with ADHD, because I couldn't speak to my psychiatrist about it. And then I hit a moment, it became a time where I was receiving emails from people thanking me for my newsletter. And at the time, I just thought it was just me talking nonsense to myself. But over time, I saw that it was resonating with people saying they, got their ADHD diagnosis thanks to reading my newsletter or my tweets. And then I started to take it a bit more seriously in terms of, checking my writing for spelling mistakes, grammar, and just making sure anything I put out was like my own experience or like research that I'd seen. But I always tweet based on my own experience, so people can't use that against me.
Yeah,
it's really funny. I started taking it seriously, so I checked my spelling.
I started to use Grammarly, the free version.
Right.
So, what were or are some of the things that you talk about in your newsletter?
Some of the things I talk about in my newsletter is, one, my diagnosis story, because there are so many people out there, especially in the UK, who don't know where to start with getting diagnosed with ADHD. I also talk about not living up to neurotypical standards. And of course, we live in a capitalist society. Well, the majority of the world does. And we are almost always held to standards that are set out for people who are like neurotypical, whose, I guess, brains work in a certain way, or whose brains are expected to work in a certain way. So that was me coming out and saying, F these standards, I am neurodivergent. This is how my brain works. You're either going to work with me, or not. And then I also talk about neurodivergence at work, which is what I speak to a lot of companies about, and something I'm super passionate about as someone who is in the workplace, who thinks every organization should have accommodations for neurodivergent people. So those are just some examples of things I talk about in my newsletter.
So I love that. So you talk a lot about ADHD and work. So what are some of the things that you would do or talk about if you were to go into a business and talk about this? What would be the topic?
The first thing that I find that businesses don't consider is actually wanting to have an organization that's filled with, it's diverse, but that also includes neurodivergent people. But that starts at the hiring practices. So if I'm filling out an application form, there are some employers that are disability confident. So they say, tick this box if you have a disability, and, they have a guaranteed interview scheme. So if you do meet the bar, but there are so many applicants, we will still put you forward because you meet the bar, and we want to increase the numbers of disabled people. Another thing employers don't think about is if I'm neurodivergent, I'm applying for a role and I'm expected to give a presentation on the day, giving me the material, earlier on or a couple of minutes before so I can familiarize myself with it, that will help. Giving me extra time to complete, let's say, a coding exercise, that will help. So I feel like accommodations start at the hiring practices, not just when, neurodivergent people, get employed or in an organization. And I feel like that's what employers, don't think about. And then within the organization, I think it's just setting a culture, of inclusivity, because oftentimes you hear people saying to their employers, can I use noise cancelling earphones, or can I just use headphones whilst I work? And, the response that I've been told is they say, well, it won't be fair, you're getting special treatment. But if you fostered an inclusive environment, then colleagues won't see a special treatment. They understand that that meets the need. Or maybe employers can think about just setting that rule that everyone can use headphones, so it doesn't feel like everyone is being treated differently. Having, I guess, a desk away from, the busy areas. Some neurodivergent folk don't like hot desking. So just little things like that can just make the workplace a bit more inclusive for us. And, that can, I guess, enable us to thrive in these workplaces.
I find that so interesting that, everything you're saying right now, these are the same conversations that we have about, transitioning through, middle school, high school here, in the US, and into, higher education, postgraduate education, people who are struggling with the more rigorous accommodations available early on, and they become less rigorous or less, accessible the older you get in progressing through school. And here you are talking about the same things that employers are not thinking about largely, because they're so rarely confronted by those things. How, I am so curious about your perspective and the people who share with you that their employers are they starting to wake up to the fact that accommodations for ADHD are a real thing that we need to address and think about?
So I know some people have mentioned that some of the larger organizations have neurodiversity employee resource groups. So they have internal networks that help to, I guess, raise awareness of all neurodivergent conditions, including ADHD, and help them to understand, I guess, the symptoms and traits we struggle with, so that when we do come with accommodations, it's not like we're asking for the world. They can understand why we actually need them. And then there are some organizations who just think ADHD, it's just you can't sit still, or you're not concentrating, or you're lazy. So they don't really understand, how much we'd benefit for some accommodations, or how we struggle in certain areas and where we might need some support. So I still think there just isn't that understanding of how ADHD can impact someone's performance at work. But then there's also ADHD can cause you to thrive at work, just as long as we're given the right accommodations and we have, colleagues and managers who help us play to our strengths. So I think it's a mixed bag, really. I don't think we are there yet. I know lots of organizations have done decent jobs in mental health. So anxiety, depression, it can, be a co-occurring condition with ADHD. And I'd like to see what has been done in the mental health space be done when it comes to neurodivergence as well.
I was talking to an HR director just yesterday, and we were talking about the immense struggle it has been adapting the medium-sized organization of 50 people, because the CEO has said, I don't need to think about those things at work. That's what our health plan is for, right?
Oh, wow.
Go get your therapy. Go do what you need to do. I have supplied that service so that we don't have to think about it here.
Wow.
And that feels like such a weird out to supply the service, but not allow the accommodations so that people can actually thrive in the job.
Exactly. And it's very different. So I've gone to therapy before, and I can have an amazing therapy session for 50 minutes, feel great during the session, maybe a couple of hours after the session. But at work, if the problems don't change and things aren't done to help you, whether it's manage your workload better, to help you organize yourself better, then everything you've learned at therapy, how do I put it? Everything you've learned therapy has helped during that moment. But if the problem still persists at work, things aren't going to change. So it's almost trying to stick a plaster over like a big hole in the wall, essentially.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. I like that you talk about what kinds of accommodations are available, because I think a lot of times clients that I have, they don't know what to ask for. So I think having that conversation and just saying that having the noise canceling headphones can really make a difference. I mean, just having some information around what to ask for. And in the big scheme of things, they're not big things. They're not going to cost anything, to the company.
And it helps everyone. So another example of like an accommodation I asked for. So having ADHD, I'm not the most organized person in the world. And I forget things, and I don't pick things up. But what I've asked for is flexible deadlines. So I asked teams to give me like a hard deadline and a soft deadline. So if you're telling me you need something by tomorrow, let me know that's an absolute hard deadline, so I know, okay, this needs to be met. But if you build flexibility within like the time frame, that leaves room for slippages, which might happen. And when it comes to scheduling meetings, schedule it 5 minutes behind the hour, so there's time for breaks. I get restless during the day very easily, so I might not be able to sit still and concentrate because I've had back-to-back meetings. So it's just little things like that, and that could help everyone in the organization, whether they have ADHD like or not, and it's not going to cost anything.
This is this may be something different in the UK than what we're dealing with, but I'm seeing a question in the chat room, or a comment that I'm hesitant to be upfront with ADHD diagnosis divulging during the hiring process as somebody who's going into a new job. I'm just not ever sure that doing so won't discourage them from taking me on. What is your sense of opening up about your ADHD in the hiring process, and I guess especially, what's your sense of the cultural acceptance of ADHD across the UK right now?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I get so many people ask me similar questions from the community. I would say to judge it for yourself. Personally, I haven't ever disclosed my ADHD as part of the hiring process, or even on the job, until I have felt comfortable with that person. One, the cons of disclosing on an application, some people have said when they've disclosed their ADHD or other types of neurodivergencies, they haven't gotten the job, and they think it's possibly because they've disclosed it. On the one hand, people can say, well, if you've disclosed your ADHD and you haven't gotten the job, would you really want to work for that organization? But then again, in the UK, we are going through a massive cost of living crisis. Inflation is the highest it's been in 40 to 60 years. So some people might be in a better position to want to work for organizations that are like ADHD friendly, let's say, whereas other people, they probably can't afford to pass up on jobs. There's that trade-off. But I think for me personally, I disclosed my ADHD to my manager probably over a year after my diagnosis. And that's only because I featured in a piece for the New York Times, and I had took pictures for it. And I was paranoid that she'd somehow come across it. But at that time I trusted her, and her response was amazing. Was just like, thanks for telling me. Is there anything that I can read up on? Should we change things around to make things better for you? She was really keen to understand ADHD. So yeah.
Well, and as a past HR person, I think it is smart not to say anything if you don't have to, because there really isn't any reason to. You don't know necessarily what you may or may not need until you're in the job, and why put yourself in a situation, because not everybody understands it. I mean, that's the reality.
Yeah.
Not everyone understands it, and I personally would, and you're right. I mean, I think the answer is you have to trust your own instinct, and you have to know, like, you have to trust yourself and what you think about this company and who you're talking to. But I always tell my clients, if you're going to be interviewing for a company, interview them just as much as they're interviewing you. Ask about the culture, ask about hours, ask about deadlines, ask about what, where would you be seated? Because you may not even know where your desk is, in the interview, right? So find those things out and ask as many questions as you can to see if it's the right fit for you.
Exactly. And then I guess one argument for disclosing you have ADHD is that, okay, you want to know whether if you have very specific accommodations that you need to ensure that the job can provide. But one thing that I've learned from people that I speak to, so I have a Discord channel for neurodivergent people working in the workplace, is that some workplaces make you fill out forms to demonstrate why you need this, like it's called reasonable adjustment. So why is your, I guess, ADHD so severe that you need this accommodation or adjustment? So there's also that. So again, I think people should, do their research, trust their gut and decide, okay, what are the risks and benefits with disclosing and not disclosing. But I never push anyone to disclose, but then, it's again on the individual.
We've been talking about this whole series. We've been talking the series, I should say, is around ADHD influencers, and those with an outsized influence and intention to teach and bring awareness to ADHD and broader neurodiversity and mental health issues. And you are one of those ADHD advocates, and you asked specifically that not to be known as an ADHD influencer. And I read it, and it's all I could think about. I would love to know your position on the word influencer and what that means to you.
Yeah, so I feel like the term influencer can mean so many things, but I think as of late that there are so many negative connotations attached to that word. But then also when I think influencer, I think someone who is influencing people to buy certain things, to live a certain lifestyle, to brand themselves in a certain way. So I find that it's more about brand, materialistic, just things, luxury. I feel like it just
like you don't want to be associated with those sorts of things.
It's kind of like I don't think it sticks. Whereas an advocate is like you're speaking up for yourself and others and trying to fight the good fight for a group of people and individuals. And so it kind of feels like apples and oranges. So not that I have an issue with the word influencer. I have many friends who are influencers, but because I know what they do as influencers and what I try to do to advocate for people with ADHD and other neurodivergent individuals, sometimes I feel like it's quite different, maybe. No offense to the influencers. I love you all.
Yes, exactly. Right. Because I probably bought these iPods because of something I saw on, because of Pete.
Somebody influenced
Pete is my influencer.
I'm your influencer.
Pete, you tell me to buy something Apple and I buy it.
Welcome to the Pete-fluence, everybody. Smash that like button.
I love it. But I will take it if it makes sense for people when they are thinking about people who help people with ADHD.
Absolutely.
So
I feel like there is just such a gift to you learning out loud. Like we started with this conversation, and I'm curious now that to transition into the tools of your platform. What obviously Substack is a big part of your contribution to the body of knowledge. What do you find in terms of your the platforms that you use, and what are the platforms you love and why?
I think so for me and for my own benefit, Twitter will always be my first love because it's where I learned so much about ADHD and my own ADHD. There is this hashtag called Ask ADHD, and you can search through it or just ask a question and you'll have so many people responding to any questions you have or anything that you're struggling with. So Twitter is my go-to. The other thing I love is YouTube. So of course, How to ADHD, videos. I try to listen to podcasts as well. So shout out to your podcast, ADHD for Smart Ass Women. Listen to podcasts on the go to, I think, help myself have a better understanding of my ADHD and things that I struggle with. And then also Discord, where I can speak to other working professionals that have ADHD.
So do you have a YouTube channel yourself, or do you do not truck in video?
Oh no, so I watch how to ADHD videos, but I have an Instagram channel. So in terms of the content that I put out is on Substack, Substack, Instagram, Discord, and I also have flashcards. So a range of things.
Yeah, tell us more about the flashcards. I'm curious
Yeah,
about those.
let's get into that.
So I do have them here. I guess the audience won't see it. So
brand deal. No, wait, these are yours.
These are mine, handmade. Took me 6 months to make them. So essentially, when I first got diagnosed with ADHD in 2020, there was so much out there. So there is nothing short on the internet on ADHD. But what I found so I have got a short attention span and I just can't read large volumes of text. So what I found that I was coming across so many different articles, very hard to digest. Lots of them were very scientific. And I just needed someone to tell me, what is this trait? Can you give me an example so I just know this is what I struggle with? And then also coping strategies and tips for whatever I struggle with. So that didn't exist in like one place. And when you read like the diagnostic criteria for ADHD, a lot of the examples are very specific to children and people who are in like school. And I'm not at that point in my life. So I thought about, okay, so what can I do alongside my newsletter to help people kind of like have maybe a beginner's understanding of ADHD and something they can use as a starting point to start the dialogue or to do further research on and to also help them as well. So I thought about an ebook initially. I just didn't want to sit and write it. So that wasn't happening. I had people approach me to like write books. They're like, yeah, I can give you a book deal. I'm not going to sit down and write that anytime soon. But I knew I wanted a physical product. So I decided to put together flashcards. So in university, we'd have these flashcards to like write notes on to study for like a big exam. Mm-hmm. And my sister is in med school, and I'd always see her carrying bags of these flashcards. And I just had a eureka moment and thought, okay, I'm going to do that with ADHD. So I created decks, 25 cards in one deck on ADHD hyperactive impulsive type traits, and then ADHD inattentive type traits, because I have ADHD combined type, so essentially both. So how each deck works is that you have an ADHD trait, let's say procrastination, a description of what procrastination is, including some examples as to why you might procrastinate. A few examples of procrastination in adulthood, so people can either resonate with them, especially if they're suspecting they have ADHD, and then top tips on how to deal with procrastination, such as productive procrastination, which is doing something, leaving what you're doing and doing something else that needs to be done, and then you will have, you get a dopamine rush and you have that motivation, and then switching back to what you actually need to get done in the moment. So I have that for all of the ADHD traits, stroke symptoms, and all of these traits are in the ADHD diagnostic criteria.
These are like awesome and legit learning tools here. Like these are these are not like, here's a flashcard to help you feel good today.
No, and so much easier to read than a book.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yes. Books are stupid books.
Yeah, I'll take that. Very much easier to read. And so I get messages from so many people about how the flashcards has helped, but I had to post one. This woman said her stepdaughter is 10 years old and was struggling with rejection sensitivity dysphoria, and that she had read the flashcard and gone away and looked at so many YouTube videos, and now she feels so much better and can manage her RSD better. Mm-hmm. And that shocked me because my target market is like adults or people in their late teens, and to just get that email was just mind blowing. Yeah. So it's doing good. So like, and it's helping people, and that's what I really care about with these cards.
Well, and what I love about it is it's like a toolbox, right? It's like an ADHD toolbox. And the one thing that ADHDers will tend to do is forget about what works. And so when you're dealing with procrastination, to have something like that on hand, to be able to say, okay, so what does this say again? How can I handle this again? Or how can I, maybe do something a little bit different, it gives you that resource so quickly without having to go do a deep dive on the internet again about procrastination, you know?
Exactly. And it's also, I know someone who said that their mum was reading these cards and their mum was just like, wow, okay, I struggle with all of these things. And on the UK National Healthcare Summit, it says that ADHD is likely to be hereditary. So if you have it, one of your parents could have it. So it's just funny to see that people's parents are like, oh, this could be me.
Yeah, well,
this is a lot like me.
Once you get to the other side of where you are and you start looking at your kids and saying, oh, crap, look what I handed down. Yeah, it does. It doesn't feel great when you're trying to navigate your own ADHD and realize you just gifted it to them by dint of heredity. But you know,
but you gifted a lot of other great things too, and something that
thank God.
Yes, and something I say to parents that have ADHD, that and their kids have ADHD, is you are a great model for them because you understand them, you get them, and so there is a common understanding there of how hard certain things can be. So it can be a very fortunate thing in a lot of ways.
Yes, it is. Thank you. That's very
How is that,
Nikki?
Pete? I find that interesting because I don't have kids, but I do want to have kids, and now I'm thinking like I can't even look after myself. I don't have any pets, so how is it going to be with kids?
There is this, I don't know, I'm speaking for no one but myself, but there is this sense when I was diagnosed, we found out we were having kids. There was this sense that I had that I was like, okay, I've got to hurry. I've got to hurry and figure this out. Right. Like I need to figure out everything that has to do with everything with my ADHD, because I know one of them or both are going to land with it at some point. And true to form, they did. And you know what it was? We ended up, I call us a nice little team. Like we're an ADHD team, and we
I love that.
Have each other's backs. And my wife is a speech and language pathologist, and so she does not have ADHD, but absolutely relates and works with kids in the schools who have it as a comorbid, symptom to their speech and language communication development. And so we all just sort of, I feel very lucky that we all ended up in a place where we can support one another. So
that sounds lovely.
It's not that bad. It's not that bad. We're
good to know.
Yeah, right. We're okay. Hey, you're fantastic. Thanks.
Thank you so much
Thanks for hanging out with
here
us today, Rach.
It was so fun.
Well, you just real quick, let's do the rundown of where people can and should follow you. Instagram, Adulting ADHD, right?
Yes, check.
Okay. Twitter, Adulting ADHD.
Yes.
Okay. Substack is just still Adulting ADHD. Is it just substack.com/? Yeah. Okay. We've got 3. And then the final one is the ADHD traits flashcards, and that's just ADHDtraits.com, right?
You're smashing it, Pete. Exactly.
That's all from legit memory. Yeah. Like that was mostly me testing myself, trying to.
Fantastic. No, you got all of them, and I need your addresses because I'd love to send you some flashcards just to have if you want them.
Oh my God, I would love that.
Would absolutely
Christmas
love them.
came early.
Yes,
oh, fantastic.
Thank you.
We will certainly put all the links in the show notes. If there's any place else that you want to be, have you started your TikTok channel yet? Do we have any ADHD dance videos coming? Or
do you know what do you guys think about TikTok? So I don't know. I started posting on Instagram Reels, but I feel like TikTok I know has helped so many people with ADHD, but it's a certain level of cringe that I'm just not ready to go down the road.
Yeah, totally get that. We did, although talk to on our last in our series was Casey Davis, who has 1.4 million followers on TikTok, and she
amazing.
She does a delightful job of integrating helpful tips and strategies with fun how to dance sober videos. I think you could unlock something.
What I learned, and also from our other guest, is that it's not all dancing. Because I kind of thought TikTok of just dancing, and because I have a teenager and she is on it all the time. But I definitely learned that that's not what it's all about, and that there are it can be a really good way to get the word out. I personally don't think you're going to see me on TikTok anytime soon.
I'm still pushing for it.
Yeah, he's still pushing for it, but I don't think so. You know, you can only do so many things.
Exactly. I feel like if I got a TikTok, then I feel like I'd get addicted to it because I heard the algorithm on there is crazy. So I know I'd just be addicted to my phone.
Yeah.
I think that's the real danger for me too. It's like I've had to do a cleanse and get all that stuff off. I can't. I don't know if I can afford it. My attention can't afford it. Well, you were wonderful. Thank you so much for hanging out with us, Rach. You're great. Great to meet you. And I hope this is not the last time our paths cross.
No, not at all. Thank you all. Thank you both for having me, and I've just had an amazing time.
Thank you.
Oh, you're wonderful. Thank you. We appreciate all of you for downloading and listening to this show. Thank you for your time and your attention. Don't forget, if you have something to contribute to this conversation, we're heading over to the Show Talk channel in the Discord server, and you can join us right there by becoming a supporting member at the deluxe level or better. On behalf of Rach Idowu and Nikki Kinzer, I'm Pete Wright, and we'll see you right back here next week on Taking Control, the ADHD podcast.